Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I so wish we could gather together in person at the Carlson School for this conference. It's always been a highlight for me every year, and I'm already looking forward to this time next year when hopefully we can all be together again. However, I am very excited that we are able to host this special Inside the Boardroom event today. As you learn soon, if you don't already know, Annie Young-Scrivner is immensely talented, and I'm so grateful she's with us for a conversation. Let me tell you a bit about Annie before bringing her in to answer my tough questions, which will be followed, of course, by a chance for all of you to ask her your own questions. Annie is currently the CEO of Wella Company, which is a global leader in the beauty industry. Even if you don't know the brand Wella, I'm sure there's not one among us who hasn't been to a nail salon and used their OPI products. So it's an amazing, amazing firm, really, and we'll hear more about it as she comes on. As well as inaugural CEO, which is again a very interesting thing, she's responsible for building the strategic growth framework for the company, which basically Wella returned to independent operating status only in December 2020 for the first time since 2003. And before joining Wella, Annie served as 3 years as CEO of Godiva Chocolatier. She also previously has worked at Starbucks, where she held several leadership roles, including Global Chief Marketing Officer and as President of Tazo Tea. Annie began her career with a 20-year tenure at PepsiCo. There, she held positions in marketing, sales, and general management, working in 30 different countries worldwide, and serving as president and chairman of PepsiCo Foods in Greater China. Annie serves on the board of directors of Yum Brands. Her past board leadership includes Tiffany & Company, Macy's, and Starbucks Japan. Annie received her bachelor's degree from the University of Washington's Foster School of Business, and more importantly, her executive MBA from the Carlson School of Management. Her executive education training also took her to the Yale School of Management, to Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia, as well as IMD in Switzerland. For me personally, it has been immensely thrilling to see Annie's incredible energy and success over the past few years. With that, Annie, welcome, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Cherie. It is an honor to be here. And like you said, I wish we were all together in person. Hopefully next time I will get a return invite and see everybody in person. But thank you so much for this amazing opportunity.
We would love that, Annie. Let me start off with a few questions about your background and career. Your parents were entrepreneurs. And how did their various endeavors impact you as a child and now as a leader?
You know, I moved to the States when I was 7 and didn't know a stitch of English. So observation became a key skill that I really honed in on. And being raised by entrepreneurs, you really have to be agile and you have to understand the needs of the consumer and shift quite readily. And I think some of those skill sets has enabled me to think about what are the needs of the consumer, who are the underserved, and how can a business really thrive by two things. Again, meeting the needs of the consumer, but more importantly, making sure that you have a great group of people around you that could really unlock the potential. I think those would be the two key things.
You talk about having a great group of people around you as you advance in the business. You've probably served as a mentor to many of them, but how has mentorship helped you in your career, and what advice would you offer to young leaders today, especially young women who are looking for mentors and looking at how they can advance their own careers in their organizations?
I think mentorship is really important, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. And as a woman, I would have to tell you, majority of my mentors, particularly early on in my career, were mostly men. men and women make great mentors. And I think that, a couple of things, it's sometimes very organic because you will have where your company has set you up formally with someone. It doesn't always work. What's worked for me is take an opportunity, connect with someone, and just reach out. And mentorship goes both ways. As a mentee, I'm always thinking about how I could give back to my mentors. And I will tell you, some of my greatest lessons were learned through people that have mentored me, on the job training. One of my mentors, Craig Weatherup, what he taught me was probably one of my biggest derailers, he said, is perfectionism. He said, you always want to be so perfect that people don't want to help you. And for me, what I always thought it would be so disrespectful if I didn't have all the answers. I used to walk into the boardroom when I had to present, studying all my notes at night, just thinking through what the board was going to ask me. And what he taught me is some of the flaws that you have is actually what makes you really strong. One of my other mentors is Indra Nui. She has taught me so much about performance with purpose, how you build a business, but how you are purposeful so that you can create a better environment, not only for your company, but for the world. And I would say I've had mentors, peer mentors. Jessica Phillips, she's on this call right now. She's a very successful leader that has worked at Sephora. She's now at Ulta. She and I, how we met was through the executive MBA program, and she has been just a delight. I have people that are much younger than me that are mentoring me now on what's pithy. So I think it comes in all different shapes and sizes. And then I think it's really important to give back. So if you're looking for a mentor, look at your network and just engage and have those organic conversations that may more formalize.
I think that's great advice. I too find that it's the organic relationships that are most beneficial. And I fully agree about also getting mentoring from those who are younger than you, who are, one of my best mentors has been our daughter, actually. So that's kind of an interesting reverse mentoring situation that you end up in these days. I think, as you've, I think you highlighted something about, not always looking for perfectionism, but that sometimes our flaws are what, make us, make mentors more willing to help us as well. In some sense, have you ever had a really bad job or situation, or there's a situation where you feel you failed, and is there something you've learned from that?
I think one of the things that I tend to do, my husband tells me all the time, I'm very critical of myself. Mm-hmm. And I think the key thing for anybody is understand that it's important to take calculated risks. If you fail, it's okay. But two things, you want to fail fast and return and get back on and keep going. Second is you don't want to fail twice the same way. So make sure you learn from it and move on. And sometimes, it's just timing. Your idea could be really good, but it was just the wrong time. And so that's why I'm in a new business now, and getting into the new business, some of the ideas are fantastic. It was the wrong time. And so teaching the organization, it's okay that you try that, but let's try it again now, I think is really, really important. I think the trick is don't be afraid. Everybody has failed, and everybody has failed multiple times.
In that context too, Annie, you talk about everybody's failed. You want to learn from all of these. You've held many senior roles at global companies. And so which of these have been most important to learning from, to advancing in your career itself?
I'm going to tell you my early day roles. So I was an intern at PepsiCo, and when I graduated, I had an opportunity to go into their sales management program. And after 4 years, my first role in the management program was to drive an 18-foot truck and load it myself, deliver product. I am not the most muscular person, and moving product around was very hard. So what I learned early on, Sri, is hard work and learning the details of the business is really important. But it was probably my first leadership role. I was 21, 22 at the time. I had 15 sales reps. They were all Teamster union locals. Their average age was 45. And they basically said to me, I was the only woman, the only minority. They said, basically, what are you going to teach me because you're younger than my daughter? So in that moment, what I learned is I wasn't going to be the smartest. They had 20 years of experience on me. But what I could do is to find out how each of them, what was important to each of them, and how do I galvanize their talent so that there was a holistic plan in which the team could be better if they worked together. That year, we became the #1 district. We won every single sales contest. And I think a lot of it had to do with bringing everybody's talent together and harmonize as one. And I think that lesson really early on has carried through even today. It is not about one individual, it is about the collective. And the alignment in the collective could be so incredibly powerful.
Right. I mean, that's, again, a great lessons, Annie. I mean, this the role of the collective and how do you bring them together and so on. And clearly you had this experience, you had this learning very, very early in your, career in management. So, I mean, how did business education play a role as you, took what you were already gained from your experience and as you advance towards leadership positions in the various companies you worked at? What role do you see business education playing there?
It played an immense role. I was at PepsiCo. I had different opportunities within one company, but it was still the consumer packaged goods world. I had this hunger to learn more about different industry. And the beauty, the gift that I got from Carlson School of Business is I was surrounded by others, great people, other industry. I learned about technology. I learned about healthcare. We had PhD students that were very successful leading businesses at the Mayo Clinic, Medtronics, people from Target. It was fantastic because it allowed me to understand how different industries worked and created relationships that lasted a lifetime. There's several people that I still connect with.
That's amazing. I love to hear that. I love to hear that our alums are in touch with other members of their class and still, do things with them and so on. So this is just great. I'm also curious. I mean, you talk about your roles in management and how business education has helped you and so on. I know you've been on several boards, and what contribution do you consider most meaningful, one as a board member versus as a senior management leader?
I counsel a lot of people that are interested in getting on boards, and I would say that the key thing is when you lead a company, you're into the details and you're actually doing the work. As a board, it's really important to understand your role, which is to guide the organization and not actually do the role of management. And when companies are building a board, they're almost thinking through what are the skill sets and capability that would complement the CEO and the chairman. And so you'll be recruited, whether it's for your digital technology, your branding, or your financial savviness. And I think the key thing is not to be a know-it-all. So when I got on my first board, I had a board buddy. And what I would do is get feedback right afterwards. What did I do well? what didn't I do well? And I also sat with the chair to get the same feedback. What could I have done better? And do a self-evaluation of yourself. And then what I noticed is there are certain board members that I gravitated to. They may have had more experience or they sat on more boards. And I would just ask them, hey, what's worked well for you? And what hasn't worked well for you? But I think that what you'll find is if you guys do get an opportunity to sit on a board, it's a fabulous experience. You create new relationships. You learn about a new business that you could actually bring back to your own, which is extraordinarily helpful.
Yes, I think it's this learning again, this, being able to learn from all of your experiences. That seems to be a theme in everything you've said so far. But I'm also curious, I know in many of the boards that you've been on, whether it was Tiffany's, whether it was Macy's, they've been successful in hiring quite a few women. I mean, it seems like diversity was a focus there. And has it been influencing the conversations and outcomes on boards you've been? I mean, what have you seen in your experience on boards, on various boards?
Cherie, this is a topic that you and I both have a lot of passion on. And the reality is today, there is still opportunities at all levels of the organization to include the board. If you look at the percentage of graduates, more women are graduating today. Women, according to the UN, still make 16% less than men for the exact same jobs. So tons of opportunity. And I would say as a business, it is really important to make sure that at all levels of your organization, you mirror your consumer. 85% of purchasing power is still held by women. So it's really super important, particularly for the boards that I've sat on. There has been an active effort to make sure that there is a diverse slate of candidates. Because the number one thing as a company is you want to make sure you hire the best person. If your slate is not diverse, you'll never get to the best person. No woman, no minority wants to get the job because they fit a quota. We want to get the job because we're the best. And so for Macy's, when I went on and when I left, very proud, we were over 50% women. Tiffany's was 50% women, and Yum Brands is now getting close to that 50% mark. Diversity is, it really does matter because it helps you think through the needs of the consumer, which is basically what the businesses serve.
Right. I mean, the other thing I'm blown away with actually is that you worked in 30 countries around the globe. And first of all, how did you do that? How have those experiences influenced how you solve problems or lead companies with worldwide footprints?
Yeah, it's interesting in some countries too, the way that women are treated. Mm-hmm. And I remember this is earlier in my career, and I was sat at a table and someone that worked for me was sat at a more senior table with the decision maker. And the only difference was he was a guy. So I think things have really changed. And I love the fact that women could also be helpful to other women in all these different environments. And the change, I would just give you a change in 3 years in the Middle East has been pretty significant. The first time I landed there, even though I didn't have to get covered up, I felt uncomfortable, so I was covered up. But today, you fast forward 3 years later, there's so much difference. And I think that the world is changing very quickly. But what I've always found helpful in working in countries is to follow kind of the food ritual. Food actually teaches you a lot about the culture. It teaches you about the economies of different parts of the country. So I'll give you a China example, but it would basically work anywhere. if you look at what food is eaten where, if you go to Shanghai, the food is very sweet and it's oily, and it's because oil and sugar was expensive. So if you could afford that, it meant that you had wealth. When you go up north, you had a lot of wheat, a lot of noodles. It was much poorer, very bland, and the food is much saltier because you couldn't afford the dishes, so you want to fill up with fillers. When you go to the west, it's very, very hot, and so you needed spices to ensure that you could sweat out the toxins. And so what I found is if you follow the food culture in any country that you're new in, really ask questions, you'll learn so much and you'll have an instant connection with the people.
That's, again, I love this idea of learning about a country through its food. And it's one thing we encourage our students. We have a required international experience where all of our, especially our undergrads, all of them go overseas, but also a lot of our master's students. And as we prepare them, we often say, hey, listen, go and try out. I mean, even if you've never been anywhere international before, go and, try out all the ethnic restaurants in town. Try and, get a sense of what the food culture is like. So I just love that you can actually understand something about the countries that you've been in through the food, and even within country, the differences in a country like China from region to region. That's really, quite amazing. I want to sort of, turn a little bit towards a slightly more personal situation right now, which is, you're operating a huge global company. It's a global operation. And with technology these days, we're always reachable, right? And particularly in this pandemic time, we've realized that we can be reachable no matter where, and no matter how. And so the question is, how do you draw boundaries around work and personal time? And has that been more challenging now during the pandemic? And what advice do you have for all of us? I mean, men and women, but particularly for women in setting those guardrails?
I have to be honest, I've never been good at drawing the boundaries. And I think that it's even harder today. And in particular, in my new role, I'm learning the business and trying to engage with everybody as much as possible. So we're in 100 countries across the globe. And I took this role on, and I've only met my leadership team once in person. And it was when Frankfurt would allow an American passport. I've never seen having an American passport be an issue, but this pandemic has been. So a lot of it has been via Zoom. And the headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. So there's quite a bit of a time difference. So it has been challenging, but here's what I would say. Everybody has to draw their boundaries on work life, personal matters. And depending on how you draw that boundary, your career trajectory could go faster or it could go slower. For me, when my kids were little, one of the things I always did is made sure that I had dinner with them at home. But it meant I went home, had dinner with them. It meant, opening up my laptop again. I would share with my team, here's why I'm doing it, here's why. And I think everybody's really respectable of what you decide to do. I also had the opportunity and have an extraordinarily supportive husband. He has moved on all my moves with me. And so it's allowed my career to advance faster. I have friends, and Sri, they're smarter than me, more talented than me. They've chosen not to move. Some of them have had just as great or better careers than me, and some have not because those opportunities weren't there. So I think it's really personal. I would just say, make sure you draw your own boundaries and do make sure that you're thinking about your own mental health. And the other thing is to be cognizant that not everybody is like you. And I think in this environment, your top performers are still your top performers and working probably even harder. And people that probably took advantage of the system is probably taking more advantage of the system. And so what I found is the bell curve is pretty much the same. What we've done at Wella Company is we've also given people tools for that mental wellness. And I saw it in my own kids. My daughter has been in this hybrid system where it's mostly online. Last week, she's in high school. She went back to school, physical school, and it was like this ray of sunshine that exuded from her. So we're all human and we need that personal interaction. And so we have to be very cognizant of when our teams can't have that today.
That's absolutely right. I think many of us are just waiting to be able to go back and see people in person again. But at the same time, the flexibility that this time has suddenly made us realize that we can afford to be a little more flexible. And how do we do that in a way that works for everyone is going to, it's going to be an interesting challenge. I mean, it's as we go forward. And I know all of us are thinking very deeply about that. But I mean, you've had the additional kind of situation of actually switching major jobs during the pandemic. What would you recommend for people who've had to, who are trying to switch jobs at this time when people still aren't back in person or starting new roles? How do you learn about a place you're entering, learn about the culture? How do you sort of get familiarize yourself with, that environment?
I started out by reading as much material as I can on just past presentations. And this may not work for everybody, but this is what I've chosen to do. Then I went on a global listening tour and I did small group environments up to 15 people. And the questions I asked was pretty consistent. What's working for you? What's not? And if you had the Harry Potter magic wand, what's the 3 things you would do tomorrow to make our company better? Then every week I synthesized that and I shared it out with my executive leadership team. And as we heard these themes, what we started to do is start to develop plans in which we could positively impact. And what that did for me is to have a very good view in small group environment, the key rocks that we need to go focus on. Then I went into each function and team review with their leaders and dove a little bit deeper into those areas and then knitted a plan together and did a town hall and shared it out. That seemed to create a 2-way dialogue early, and it allowed me to engage both internally and also externally. And my external customers have been amazing. CEOs of really, really big companies to independent operators have provided me time, because ultimately the more I know, the better I can serve everybody. And so that's kind of the mindset. And I think about myself as an inverted pyramid. The closer you are to the customer, the more weight you have. And I'm here to make things easier for the rest of the organization. And so with that mindset, I think people have been really great.
That's terrific. I mean, again, very practical advice. I mean, in the questions that you're asking, what 3 things would improve the company? I mean, to be able to hear this from many, many different groups across the firm, that is so, I mean, that would be such an immense learning experience, even if somebody is in person, even if we're not in the Zoom world. I mean, I think this is a fantastic, very practical kind of suggestion. And, I'm always curious. I mean, you were already CEO at Godiva Chocolatier. You had been there for 3 years. What prompted you to move to Wella and become their, inaugural CEO? Again, I'd love to hear a little bit about what exactly that means.
Yeah, I love Godiva. I think it's the best chocolate. If you guys haven't tried it, I would recommend that. Love it. And it's very healthy, the dark chocolate. You still eat it. So there's 3 reasons why. I love the beauty industry. And when I was a little girl, I used to cut my friends' hair at home. I even had my own perm rods when perms were in, perm their hair. I did the little highlight kits. I think it started even earlier. I don't know if you guys had those little Barbie dolls with the head. I used to color those and cut those. And so I've always loved the beauty industry and grew up with a best friend that her mom owned a salon. And today the Wella Company services 500,000 salons in 100 countries. And small businesses have created economies and helped economic growth. So I felt like, wow, if I could help the beauty industry through small businesses, that's really meaningful. Second piece is KKR. This is my first time working for a private equity firm. There are a lot out there, but KKR has great reputations. And when I had an opportunity to learn more, I phoned a friend that has close interactions with KKR. They're, the cream of the crop. And I felt like working with them, I could add value, but also I can learn. The third is the portfolio of brands that Wella Company offers. If you guys don't know, it's a 140-year-old company that started in Germany. They invented the perm. And way back when the industry was just developing, their motto was, if you have an interest, we will do everything else for you. We'll figure out the design of your salon. We'll figure out the financing. We'll do the furniture. We'll do everything for you. And I just felt like, with Wella being sold to Procter & Gamble, sold to Coty, and each time KKR was involved in the bidding process. So it was something that was also really vetted out. And the portfolio brand, I love developing innovation and brand, was something I could really get my arms around as well. So for those three reasons.
That's amazing too. I mean, I just love the names you give to all your nail polishes, purple with a purpose, and rosy future. Yeah. I have them right here.
So for International Women's Day, I sent Cherie 3 rosy future, because we all know Carlson School of Business has a rosy future. Purple with purpose, because everything we do should have a purpose. And then don't bossa nova me around, because every time we want to say that, whether it's to our kids or to other people, every once in a while. But one other thing I wanted to share with you on the company is we have multiple brands that were founded by women. So OPI was founded by Susie. We have Nioxin that's founded by Eva, and it's such an amazing story. She had $500, and what she felt like is she could help everybody be their true self. She saw the difference if you didn't have hair versus if you have hair, and it's making significant impact. I have friends that are going through chemo writing to me how it's helping them, or moms that just had babies and you lose hair, helping them. And obviously all of my son's friends that are in college, believe it or not, are starting to worry about losing hair. And that's the product that they ask for. And then, so I think it's meaningful that we're carrying on these amazing women entrepreneurs and helping their brands continue to grow.
That is, again, a terrific, terrific story. At this point, I know there are probably questions from the audience, and I would love to turn it over to audience. Please put your questions on chat, and someone will read them out, and we'll get Annie to answer them directly.
Right. Yes, we have several questions. The first one is, Annie, when you take on a new leadership role in a new department or company, how do you approach adapting to the new environment?
There's probably not a perfect answer, but what I've tended to do is to really listen, to do a listening tour. And a mentor taught me that. When I was at Starbucks, I was the chief marketing officer. So I had the whole globe, and I was responsible for the marketing, the product, and had a good preview. And then Howard sent me to go run the Canada business because it's the largest business outside the US. And this one board of director pulled me aside and said, don't think you know it. Really listen, because you knew it sitting in a different seat. You're going to be in a new role. So really listen. So the first thing I would recommend that you do is do the listening tour. And it's really important as you do that to bring the key leaders along in that journey with you. Don't wait till the very end when you formulated what you want to change. Take them along in the journey so that they could help you craft it. You're probably smart enough where you could read the reports and you could just go figure it out. But I guarantee you, by taking that path of listening and engaging, the end result, you'll be able to make the changes that you need even faster. That's the first thing. Second, really understand the talent. Go through the talent review. And as you're doing your listening tour, simultaneously, you're evaluating talent within your organization. Figure out the key roles that are going to be change makers and make sure that you have the right leaders in the right roles.
Thank you. Slight COVID question. How long will it take for your industry to recover to pre-pandemic levels of business?
It's so interesting because it's already recovered through the first wave. And as you know, every country is different. And in the US, we're starting to open up, but in other parts of the world, one, it either never shut down or it's reopened. But what we're seeing is there's such an emotional connection to people's hairdressers. We literally are seeing a V when the industry completely opens up. I'll give you an example of Germany. Germany just opened up beginning of March. And what's happened is the capacity constraints are so great that, and the demand is so great, the hairdressers are working from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, and the wait list is 3 weeks back. So it's backlogged by 3 weeks worth of appointments. So I think that the industry will come back. I would say on hair. On nails, it's a little bit tougher. What we're seeing is the first pandemic, people were able to survive. If you had a second wave in your country, what happened was some people actually exited out and they moved into other industries. So what might happen in certain segments, you might see prices go up as the footprint starts to shrink. Those are a couple of the things, but we're seeing mostly a V shape.
Fascinating. What is your perspective on women in the workforce leading both US and Europe-based companies in the past year?
Can you just say that again?
Yep, of course. Yep. What is your perspective on women in the workforce leading both US and European-based companies in the past year?
I would say that, you know, wherever you look, doesn't matter anywhere, that there's still opportunity for more women to be in leadership roles. And I'll give you a very specific example of the beauty industry. You would think that majority of leaders are women. It's not true. So 90% of the industry is women, but majority of the key decision-making powers still are held by men. And there's actually very few beauty companies that are led by women. The biggest one is myself, and it's Tsunabi at Coty. Everybody else is led by males. So there's still, even in female-dominated industry, still that. I would say that the pandemic has hit women harder. Why? Let's just face it, women still do a lot of the household roles, even if you work. And what they say is if a woman works, the man is stay at home, this household chores are 50-50. And if both work, majority of the chores go on women. So what we saw was a lot of women exiting the industry, and we have to go figure out how we get them back in. And that starts with all of us holding hands to make sure, one, when we have an open position, when we have promotion opportunities, we're looking at a diverse slate. We never want to put a woman in a role just because she's a woman or someone of a different ethnicity, but we want to make sure the slate is very wide. And then we want to make sure that, to what Cherie talked about, flexibility, and that's not a woman thing, it's just a people thing. Make sure it's the right flexibility environment in this new world. And I think that will be really important. And one suggestion I have for women is, I'll give you two examples. One, I was promoting someone to an SVP role. And when I gave her the promotion, she said, "Me? Are you sure? But I have all these things that I haven't done yet. Are you sure?" A man would never do that. They would say, "I should have got it 2 months ago." So when you get the opportunity, lean in. Second is, if you feel like you should be getting a promotion and you're not, then make sure you raise it and you talk about it. And this happened to me. I went to my leader, and the way that people look at job scoping, it was based on just pure revenue. But you could have a job that has lower revenue, but tons of complexity and driving significant growth for the company. So I went to my leader and said, if I look at my peer group, I'm behind because of the way that it's being evaluated. I'm actually delivering more economic value to the company. I believe that this role is not labeled right on where it should be in the company. And my leader told me, "Hey, it's a big company. It is what it is. That's it." So I said, "Hey, since the vice chairman is coming out, do you mind if I broach this same question to him? Ask him the same question. Are you okay with that?" So I was very transparent with my boss. I broached it with the vice chairman, and he changed it because it was actually the right thing to do. And it wasn't just for me, it was for whoever else is going to have that role. So I would say the other thing is, as a woman, make sure you are your own advocate, because if I were to look at men and women, more men ask for promotions in my tenure of leading than women.
I think this is great, great advice again, to lean in, to seize those opportunities. And, the fact that the pandemic has hit women hard, and it's at all levels, all the way from the very bottom, where a lot of women are in service roles at the, in the sort of in the lowest paid kind of jobs as well. So it's just it's been a tough environment for women at all levels in this pandemic. So I just hope that we can get them back. And I know as a business school, we are very committed to trying to see if we can, at least help, the education can sometimes help, re-entry as well, because things change so fast as well when you're out of the workforce for a while. So, but the leaning in suggestions, again, very, very, very important. So Amy, more questions?
Yes, along that line, Annie, what advice do you have for women that took a career break in midlife and want to re-enter the workforce or move up the corporate ladder?
I think just get back in. I think about, when you are a mom, the multitasking, the skill set, the networking that you have to go do, put that on the resume and be proud. And then what Cherie talked about, you may want to consider taking a couple of courses just to freshen up those skill set, but lean in. I have a lot of my friends that are so incredibly talented and that have done that, whether they've gone into consulting or have just jumped right in. And then the other thing is, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations that could use additional support. You could always, lean in that way as well, and then get into for-profit if that's your choice. But don't procrastinate, just do it. And you just have to feel comfortable with, someone saying no to you, their loss.
Yes. So kind of along those lines as well, a little bit different. What is your advice for how to best handle situations when you are relegated to a lesser table, from the example you cited earlier, just because you're female, especially for women earlier in their careers before before you're known, or before one is known better, before you know better?
You're talking about is that a pay question? Sorry, Amy.
Is that a what question?
Is that a question on pay or?
No, I think it's, how to handle a situation in which you're relegated to a lesser table. When you mentioned that earlier, a man was put in a different position than you and had access to leadership. How should you handle that as a woman who might be in a newer role, a younger professional?
Yeah, it was earlier in my career. I would say just make sure that you have position power. And I have these things that I do. So I have dream big. You always want to make sure you dream big, take calculated risk. And one of the things I always say is snapshot. Nobody has a running movie on you. They only have snapshots. And so in those environments, make sure that there's the right snapshot. And if it's not right, make sure there's enough so that there's clarity of who the decision maker is, and then it'll be appropriate. And so that's what I found very, very helpful. And it was the dinner I was talking about was with a Japanese firm, but since I've worked a lot in Japan, it doesn't happen. And I was on the board of Starbucks Japan, which is publicly listed on the Nikkei. So I think that a lot of things have changed, but just make sure that you could leverage your position power to be very clear in a soft way, in your own style, who's making the decision, and people will come around.
Thank you. The next question is, I have a high school age daughter. Do you have any books or resources you'd recommend as she's early phase of considering business careers and leadership?
One of the books I really like, there's two books. One book that I really like, it's old. It's called The 1 Minute Manager, because when you're early in your career, you're individual contributors, and then you get to lead people. And I still read it every once in a while because it's a good reminder that your role is to teach people so that they could be their best, not to do your job. And I think it tends to be early on when people are feeling like they have to critique someone that's underneath them. The second book is Leadership Pipeline, because it really talks about your career, and as you move from individual contributor to people leader to leading people, what are the skill sets and capabilities that you need? For high school students that I mentor, the thing that I really encourage them to do is make sure you dream big. Think about your career in 5-year increments. Where do you want to be 5 years from now? What are the skill sets and capabilities that you need to reach that role? Because things are going to change. It's very fluid. But if the higher you get, it's more about leadership capability, then think through whether it's in high school or in college, the skill sets that you can develop. Volunteer to lead groups, volunteer to be in clubs, and take on that leadership role, because the biggest thing is humanity, human connection. How do you manage that? How do you not only own people's minds, but their hearts? Because that's when you win.
Thank you so much. Someone is asking, how would you describe yourself as a mom?
It's funny. I love my kids, and I would say I am hands-on, but not. I try to give them experiences. My kids have moved all over, and it was rough because every time we moved, they had to re-network with people. But what it enabled them to do is to develop relationships really quickly. The other thing that they've done is every time we went to the doctor's appointment when they were old enough, we asked them to ask the doctors question. We never wanted it to be a barrier between adult and children so that they can have direct conversations. I would tell you that I have a lot of mom guilt. I remember working in Shanghai and my son told me when he was little, Mom, you have to come to my play. I'm going to be a hill. Yes, a hill where you run and you put a little blanket over yourself. He was a hill. He said, you have to come to my play. I'm the hill. So it took me an hour and a half to drive to get to his school so I could say hi to him and say, Mommy is here. Watch him be a hill and then drive back. Does he remember that I was there? No, but I had felt so guilty because I couldn't make any of his play. So now I always remind him, when you were the hill, I was there. So I try to be there as much as possible. And look, we all work really hard. Half the things we feel guilty on, they don't really remember. I think it's to be there and to make sure that you have a close relationship. If they need help, they could come to you. That would be my advice.
I agree. I've been to our daughter's play when she was a bird helper. She wasn't even the bird, but she was the bird's helper. I think we've all been through that. So
I will tell you this really cool thing though. When I got my diploma from Carlson School of Business, I took my son on stage. He was 18 months old at the time. And so we collected it together.
That's fantastic. I'm always so proud of all the mothers and fathers who sometimes bring their children and walk across the stage with them. That is always so heartening.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you are considering the executive MBA program that's on, but it was a fabulous experience. You guys should all consider it. And if you have people that are in different industries thinking about business, I think it's really smart. I think that there's going to be a lot between medicine and business, technology and business, and it doesn't matter what you end up doing. You need to know, the debits and credits at the end, and it's a great program.
Do we have time for one more question, Amy?
I think we have one more, and this is a forward-looking question. This will be a good way to end. But what business concentration, finance, marketing, data analytics, do you see as being the greatest need in the next 5 to 10 years? How would you steer students interested in pursuing business degrees?
I think first of all, you should understand your own strength and where you have an interest. Because if you say, hey, finance is the hottest thing, go after that, I don't think that's going to work out. So figure out what interests you. But one thing for sure is the only constant is going to be change. So really understand, take some of the behavioral management courses on how to galvanize team and how to move things forward. I think is going to be really important. Technology, we're just at the start of it. Who would have thought, driverless car is around the corner? When you start to go think through AI, that's going to be really important. And that's going to matter whether it's in finance, whether it's in marketing, all of that matters. So really make sure that you think through what you're passionate about and then go for it. And think about your career in 5-year increments.
Thank you, Annie. I think this has been there's so many great lessons in what you've told us and sort of inspiring us to push forward. So thank you for that. Before we all leave, I do want to remind all of you that on Thursday of this week, Carlson Global Women Connect will be hosting a discussion about today's events and also providing working opportunity. That begins at about 11:30 a.m. Central Time, and hope to see you all there and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie.